Citizens, Board, and staff. I call to order the Building Board of Appeals July 19, 2017 meeting. May we have a roll call, please?
Yes. Board Member Mansky.
Here.
Board Member Houchin.
Here.
Chair Mitchell.
Here?
Board Member Kaiser.
Here.
Board Member Eby.
Here.
And Board Member Flaherty.
Here.
Board Member Flaherty is here as an alternate. She will not be a voting member tonight.
And we have a quorum. First item on the agenda is approval of the agenda. Does anybody have any comments on the agenda? May I have a motion?
I so move.
I second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. The agenda is approved. The next item is ID number 17148, approval of the minutes of the April meeting, and there is a certificate attached. Does anybody have any comments on the minutes from that meeting? May I have a motion?
Move to approve the minutes.
I'll second.
May I have a vote? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
If you don't mind, Chair, I'm going to go down the line and get each person's vote.
Okay, that's fine. Okay.
Okay, Board Member Mansky.
Aye.
Board Member Houchin.
Aye.
Chair Mitchell.
Aye.
Board Member Kaiser.
Aye.
Board Member Eby.
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay, next is the public comment, and that can either be on the general business, which is in the agenda, or a non-agenda item. And we have, to my knowledge, a couple people on the list. Who would like to be first?
Good evening, Board. My name is Norman Brown, and my address is on the list there. I was sitting where you are for many years. I was actually on the Building Board of Appeals at its inception for the City of Littleton. I think what you do is very important. We considered three areas when I was on the Board of Appeals, and we suspended and revoked contractor licenses in the city. That is a course that a homeowner can take, and that's the power that you guys have. And again, we considered alternate materials and methods. We heard the flexible gas line piping when it first came out. The flexible water piping was another thing we considered. A product developed up at CSU, treated pine shake shingles, which never caught on like the first two I remarked on have. And then also, when the code revisions came out, the chief building official always came to us to review them, and we forwarded our recommendation regarding those revisions and the code in general to the city council for their consideration, and then they would go ahead and approve it. Way back when, the air-supported structure over for the tennis courts that South Suburban has was not allowed as a permanent structure, an air-supported permanent structure in the city, and so that was one of the amendments to the code for the city of Littleton. So I was there for quite a while. I was chairman several times. I'm a bit surprised that I guess at this point I'm supposed to comment on your hearing without having heard from the staff or the appellant. I do have a consideration of that, but generally hearings of this nature when I was chair and when I was on the board and at Planning Commission where I spent a couple years, there is the presentation from both sides, sometimes a developer and staff, and then the citizens had the chance to comment. So I will be brief since 3 minutes flies by. You have some of my history. Oh, by the way, I spent my entire career in construction, a lot of tenant finish work, some historical preservation work. I had the opportunity remodeling and supervising down at the state capitol, at the governor's mansion, and on some other historic properties. So after many, many years, I saw a lot of different things and was involved in construction. That being my brief resume to indicate that I might have some well-reasoned consideration. My biggest point about your appeal tonight is that it looks like for the last 30-some years, the assembly, the alternate method that was allowed before has been sufficient, with the snow and ice shield being used on low slope roofs and superior shingle quality. I think it's something you should approve. Thank you.
Thank you.
So can you restate your name and address for the record, please? We didn't catch it.
My name is Norman Brown, and I'm not going to give my address, much as I have not at many hearings. It is on your sheet there. And what I determined many years ago was at a hearing like this, when it's live, you are announcing to the world, perhaps, that you are not at home and won't be for a couple hours. And that was a consideration for me. Thank you.
The next person is Paul Bingham.
Good evening, Board. That's basically what I'm going to present. My name is Paul Bingham. I live at 236 West Delaware Circle here in town. I lived there for 55 years. I'm an engineer. Spent all those years being an engineer, enjoyed it a whole lot.
Mr. Chair, excuse me for interrupting just a second. If this is going to be on the actual case, then we should take this testimony when we do the actual case. This is the public comment portion of this is really for things that are not part of this case. We certainly want to hear from citizens and witnesses on this case, but
That would have been my understanding, Mr. Attorney, but in the agenda that the staff prepared, it says public comment for general business or non-agenda related items, and this is under general business.
You're not the applicant? Okay.
you're not the applicant on this? Okay.
Not the applicant, no.
Okay, no. You can certainly take it now if you wish, or you could take it as part of the case. I mean, but if you want to take it now, just take it now. Okay. Mr. Chairman, my suggestion would be, why don't let's go ahead and let Mr. Bingham
What?
finish his remarks.
Let's start the timer, sir. I'm sorry.
Let's go ahead.
Steve, I didn't hear what you said. What?
You said go ahead.
I think legal's recommendation is that we go ahead and continue
Okay.
Mr. Bingham's testimony. We'll start over because of the confusion here.
Thank you.
Council has changed the rules. General business shall be commented on during the public comment. If it was a public hearing, it would be during that item, but since this is general business, now's the appropriate time to do it.
Thank you. Okay, Paul, go ahead, please.
Okay. I'm used to speaking to the city council, and,
Do you want to put one of your sheets
yes,
so that the overhead can catch it?
right there. Oh, this is a new widget here. Oh, okay, get it down a little bit. Da-da-da-da-da. There, perfect. Thank you.
Thank you.
Perfect's good enough. Thank you. I'd like to put a little, this is out of place. I'm used to speaking to the council, and when you speak to a specific item, you do do the hearing for that case, but this is okay. Anyway, here's a side view of the roofs we're talking about. This is a roof discussion. Here's a roof that's laid out here at 2 to 12. The resulting angle back here is a little bitty angle, 9.46 degrees. And that's what the spec says in this case. Apparently the roof as built is 1.75 to 12. Another little bitty angle back here, but it's also tiny, 8.3 degrees The comparison between these two, which is basically the argument tonight, or at least one of them, results in this tiny, tiny difference up here. It's 1.16 degrees. I suspect my roof isn't built that accurately. I don't know if this one is or not, but that's my guess. So this all has to do with water flowing off the roof and running in behind it and leaking and all that sort of thing. I suspect this 1.16 degree difference doesn't make any difference. Just as a comparison, this final picture down here, it has to do with open channels, just open channel flow. And that's basically what this is off of this roof, is open channel flow. And that worked just fine and is almost always set up somewhere in the neighborhood of half of a degree slope is all. And these angles up here are a little bitty, but this is a whole lot smaller than that is. So I wanted to point that out. And the other thing I wanted to point out is a part of the specs for the for the shingles and the underlayment. It says if you're going from 2 to 12 on up to 4 to 12, you need to double the amount of underlayment underneath the shingles. Well, that's going the other way. If you're going even steeper, it's saying put more underlayment on it. I would like to recommend that you folks approve this recommendation. The building official here is certainly right in saying 2 to 12 to follow the spec, but this doesn't make any difference. Please give him the whatever it is we're going to give him, the difference. Thank you.
Thank you. No one else? Okay. Then we're going to go to item number 17-209, which is the hearing in front of us regarding roofing material and slope. I'd like to just prep this a little bit, and we are operating under Title II, Chapter 4, Section 1 of the Littleton Municipal Code, and then more specifically, Title 4 of the Littleton Municipal Code, and I'm going to read a couple of sentences. The provisions of the building code are not intended to prevent the use of any material, design, or method of construction and equipment not specifically prescribed by the building codes, provided an alternate material design or method has been approved and its use authorized by the Building Board of Appeals. The Board of Appeals shall require that sufficient evidence or proof be submitted to substantiate any claims that may be made regarding the use of an alternative material design or method. So that's what we're deciding this evening. I'm going to ask staff to make their presentation. And if you would, at the podium, please.
Oh, staff. My name is Jan. Staff member. Oh, I'm sorry. That's right.
Thank you, Chair, Board. I'm Gil Rossmuller. I'm the interim chief building official for the city of Littleton until we get a new one start here later in August. So I spoke with the gentleman here, the applicant, when he told me that it was less than 212 and it didn't meet the manufacturer's specifications. I said, well, there are times in the code where history has shown where it works. We've got an entire conventional framing provision in the code that works just because we've been doing it that way. But when engineers put their words to it, like conventional frame, I'm talking about wood framing, like floors and walls and roofs, that kind of thing. That's been in the code forever. When the engineers start to look at it, they say, well, this doesn't really work. But gosh, we've been doing it forever, so now it's in the code, and it's called conventional framing provisions. And I think this might work if you would take that to the Board of Appeals and say, hey, it's been there for X number of years, and perhaps they might consider that an alternate. The fact that the manufacturer says that it can't go on less than a 212, that's where I've got to stand. So that's why we're here today. So it's pretty black and white to me. You got any questions for me?
Yes, I have a question.
Yeah.
So basically, in your opinion, not according to code, does the proposed roof assembly system that the homeowner has,
It certainly is not an unreasonable request, no.
okay, so it does meet the intent and purpose of the
That is your
2012.
decision to make.
But in your opinion,
My opinion was why we're here.
right?
I wouldn't approve it.
You would not?
No, that's why we're here.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, cool.
What other alternatives would be available to the
Well,
homeowner?
there's lots of different, flat roofing materials that, are made to go basically flat, almost to eighth of an inch, to a quarter of an inch per foot, which is very, very flat. So there's plenty of roofing products that'll do that. It'll be more of a commercial type application, TPO there's all kinds of different things that'll work, several different ones.
And just in your expertise, would there be any practical difficulties in using those other materials?
No.
Cost, installation?
No, the cost might be a little bit different. I wouldn't know what the exact cost would be, but it's probably, I don't know, it might be more expensive. Perhaps the homeowner, the applicant has actually done some of that research. I don't know. But it could very well be, yeah.
I have a question. When considering, I do know that at times a building official will grant a variance for, if there's a valid reason. Have you granted a variance for other types of roofing or sloping or anything like this in the past? Have you had a similar case come up in the past?
Yeah, I can't think of anything off the top of my head as far as roofing is concerned.
I guess a follow-up to that would be if there's precedent, such as in the packet here, the homeowner is stating that for 36, 37 years, the roof seems to be performing just fine and meeting, functionally appears to be meeting, we can only take his word on that. Is that a case where a building official might take that into consideration in a variance?
Yeah, that would be something that you guys could certainly look at. That, like I say, it stood on my reason is that it doesn't meet the manufacturer's specs.
Yeah.
Okay? And so I can't really, there is, for me, I can't say, well, sure, you can use it, and then the manufacturer looks at me like, what, are you kidding me? No,
Yeah.
you can't do that.
So is slope then the only thing that you considered in your decision?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, that would be a correct statement.
And from the building department's perspective, so there's the code, which states what it states pretty clearly here.
Yep.
Then there's the intent of the code
That's correct.
behind all of that. I guess in a case like this, is there anything you can offer about the intent of the code, why 212 is the minimum? Is it just the way it's always been? Has there been testing or warranty issues or anything?
Yes, that's why many of the manufacturers limit it is 212 for laminated or asphalt type shingles. There are asphalt products that can go lower than 212. It's just not, shingles can't do that. Laminated shingles can't do that. And it's based on their testing and their warranties and all kinds of things that go along with that. But yeah, they've just found that they get failures because they don't want it to leak when you get less than 212. They have to draw a line somewhere.
Right.
But how intensive their testing was, or maybe they did 1.5 12 and found for a certain percent that was not, so they raised it to 212. But I don't have the history on that.
Go ahead.
Yeah, because there's, there is a warranty issue there, and in the eyes of the building department,
We don't actually look at warranties per se, so whether they'll warranty it or not is not something the code really looks at.
okay.
That's the homeowner to worry about.
That's completely the homeowner's deal.
Is there a health or safety issue that you think the building department would have in a case like this?
No, the roof could leak.
Okay.
Is there a concern of the weight from the snow?
Not necessarily. One would hope that at the time that this was built, it was built to code at the time, so structurally, it should be fine. You know, it's not going to retain any water, it's just a great big shed roof, so that's not really going to be an issue. I mean, it's been there since, what, 1950-something, so it's not like it's going to go away anytime soon. So that would be up to the homeowner, and he's been there for that entire time. I can't think of anything off the top of my head.
Kind of one additional question. Does R907 subsection R907.1 apply to this request, which is an exception, if it's demonstrated that
So read to me that section, is that the one where it's
it's
got to be?
R907?
Yeah, well, I don't know it by heart, that's why they printed.
Subsection 907.1,
And it says,
does it apply to this particular request? In that there's an exception that if it's demonstrated to have positive roof damage?
You don't have it, Gil, he has it
oh,
here.
Can you
okay.
read the provision?
Yeah.
He's going to read it.
This is general, materials and methods of application used for recovering or replacing an existing roof covering shall comply with the requirements of Chapter 9. Exception, re-roofing shall not be required to meet the minimum design slope requirement in Section 905 for roofs that provide positive roof damage. And I guess it's a two-part question, why or why not?
Yeah, so this is not going to go with, this is going to be for more of a commercial application. There isn't going to be anything down to a 2% slope that's going to has anything to do with asphalt shingles. That's not just never going to work. So that exception there deals with when I'm doing a commercial roof, which generally says that it have to be at a 1/4 inch per foot minimum. This allows it to get down to 1/8. So this wouldn't apply to, this is never applied to residential shingles.
Okay, thank
Yeah.
you.
Anything else? Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Anastasia, were you going to have anything to say? Okay, thank you. Then we'd like to hear from the homeowner.
Hello, my name is Jan Dorfman. Hopefully, you've had the opportunity to read the letter and see the photographs that I submitted. I'm assuming you did? Okay. As you read, I'm a licensed professional engineer, have been since 1964. And I've done construction, I've done aerospace, I've pretty much done lots of different designs. I purchased this home in, I think, 1974. And the home, if you're familiar with the history, this is quite a famous home in Littleton. The home originally was built in '56 with a sod roof. I have the original blueprints on the home. It was built by a family by the name of Sharp.
Excuse me, would you pull the microphone down and make sure you speak into it? Thank you.
Okay.
Because this is being recorded, and we want to make sure that it's all.
Okay.
Okay.
It was built by a family, for a family by the name of Sharp. You talked about structure before. The structure in the house is sufficient that the original home had 50 tons of sod on the roof. When the sod was removed, we drove a front-end loader up on the roof to take it off. Beams in the house are 3x12s on 36-inch centers, supported by double 3x12s going crossways with a 5/4 rough sawn lumber roofing material. There's so much structure in the house, there's no deflection whatsoever. When I bought the house, I was faced with constant leaks. The sod was removed, and the structure that contained the sod remained. And it was coated with a modified roof, which is what the gentleman was talking about before, which is a lay-down, torch-down roof or glue-down roof, mastic, and then it was coated with a Silva coat or Silva Cool material. I was faced with constant leakage for many years, constantly patching it, a lot of expansion, contraction. And ultimately, in 1984, I decided this is the end of it. I had been putting a lot of money into the house, a lot of design effort, a lot of my own, virtually all my own labor, excuse me, in improving the appearance and the functionality of the house. That silver cool roof was truly ugly, absolutely ugly. And my house is built into the side of a hill. You can walk up on the roof. It's completely visible from Prince Street, and it was evident that I wanted to do something different with it. So at that point in time, I designed a roof that I felt was going to work properly. And what I did is I removed the containment vessel that was on top down to the rough sawn boards. I laid 2 inches of rigid insulation on top of those boards and then covered that with plywood. On top of that, I put on a conventional roof. Now that was also, at that time, the 212 pitch requirement was still code. And I requested a variance from the city of Littleton, which was granted. And a permit was issued to the roofer, and he applied that roof. I used an Owens Corning shingle and standard felt underlayment and flashed the roof and so forth. It has been functional and absolutely superior in performance to any other roof that I can tell in the city of Littleton. There's been no maintenance, there's been no damage, there's been no repair from 1984 until 2016. When I did the roof, I put in a cricket above the chimney, which is just a slope section to deflect the water around the chimney rather than having it splash against the chimney. And I believe I'm getting a leak someplace under the cricket, which is the west side of the chimney, and it's showing up in my garage. Haven't had the leak in any of the rains that we've had. The last leak I had got a leak on the last snow, and that was it. Because the roof is 37 years old, it does not make sense to me to have it repaired. First of all, there's no visible damage on the roof. You can walk up on my roof, you can stomp on it, you can walk the entire roof and inspect all 50 feet by 26 feet of roofing surface, and you won't see any damaged shingles. So to try to find it, I would have to rip off an awful lot of material. It doesn't make sense. The cost of that would be prohibitive, and then I couldn't even find a shingle to really match the existing design. So what I decided to do was just apply for another reissuance of the variance that I got using a much better underlayment than was originally put onto the roof with roofing felt. It's called Grace Ice and Water Shield. It's a reinforced material with an incredibly tenacious mastic on the back of it that as soon as you touch it to something, it's stuck. And if you put it on wood, it's going to tear the wood off. When you run a nail through this material, it self-seals. And that's the whole idea of it. I've used this when I redid my sun space on the house. It's fantastic. It's expensive, but it works like a charm, and it's warranted for as long as any conventional roof that I can think of. So I don't know if you'd want to see this or not. Right now, if you peel, it has a silicone impregnated paper backing on it. If you peel it off, you can feel it's tacky. But if you get this in the sun, you can barely pull it off your finger. It's so tenacious. So they roll this out, they fold it up, they pull half of the paper off, lay that down, it sticks, fold the other half up, take the paper off, and lay that down. Then they just keep laying that from bottom to top. I've got spec sheets on Grace Ice and Water Shield and so forth and so forth. On top of that, I've got this Malarkey Legacy shingle, which is considered to be a 50-year shingle. It also has a vapor barrier and glue on all the shingles. So as soon as it heats up, they all stick to each other. You can see that this is all locked in place. So this is what's going on top of that. So I end up with a shingled roof. When you talked about alternate materials, the only alternate materials that you can really put on that roof is going to be a torch down or rolled roofing, which is just granule impregnated asphalt. It looks like hell, and the appearance of it is commercial as opposed to residential. I'm right in the middle of the residential neighborhood. And I can put a metal roof on, but I don't know if any of you have lived inside a house with a metal roof. And the fact that you can walk up on my roof with the low slope, I don't like the whole idea of having any of that. This way you can walk on the shingles without any damage. I had prepared a couple of CAD drawings because leakage has never been the issue on the house from day one until, you know, something probably has deteriorated after 36 years and started to leak. But basically, I had prepared, this is laid out on CAD to probably 4 decimal place accuracy. This is a 175 12 pitch roof. This is a 212 pitch roof. And if you overlay them, you'll find out there's a 1/4 inch difference at the end, which is 60 thousandths per inch. Excuse me, which is 21 thousandths per inch. 60 thousandths per inch is a 1/16 of an inch. So I don't know any frame or any roof that stays stable within that dimensional accuracy anyway. So what I also did is I laid out the entire roof.
Chair, if you're going to present things, we need to make sure we have a record here. So if you have something that you want to present, if you have like documentation,
Well,
we want to make sure we have it all in the records.
Put it on the overhead, and then it'll be picked up.
All right,
And then the clerk can pick it up.
sure.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay, that's a 175 pitch roof. And if I overlay this,
I think that's the same that
barely see it under there, but
Paul Bingham was showing us.
a 1/4 inch difference between
thank you.
the two in 12 inches. And then the last thing is, if you really look at the roof, which is 50 feet long, this isn't to scale, this is perfectly accurate. But if you raise the roof to get to a 212 pitch, in 50 feet, I'd have to raise the end of the roof roughly 1 foot 3/8 of an inch. And that's the difference what we're talking about here. As I said, it's 21 thousandths per inch is all we're seeing is a difference. I wouldn't request the variance if I didn't have success with the design that I currently have and see no real reason to not have a variance granted for a superior designed roof. You know, the government has actuary tables that tell you when you're going to die, but if you don't die, you don't die, and the actuary tables don't get changed. So my feeling is I would very much appreciate if you could do this. I would like to replace this roof before we get into the winter. I do have a roofer that's I've been working with, who I seem to respect, has a good Better Business Bureau rating. He's willing to give me a 5-year guarantee on it for the leakage right now, and without anything. If it wasn't for, you know, other roofers typically give 3-year roofs, 3-year warranties on roofs, or rarely 5 years on the conventional roofs that are greater than 212. So he's walked my roof, he's looked at it, he's stomped on it. You've seen that there's no deterioration of the wood underneath. I've sent pictures out, which is one of the pictures is my living room, which is where the roof transitions from a rough sawn wood to a finished tongue and grooved wood across that section. And that's been there as long as I have. There's still stains on the roof in front of my on the ceiling in front of my fireplace from when I moved into the house, from the original sod roof and then the Silvacool roof that was up there. Never repaired that section because it's behind a couple of double 3x12 or 3x14 beams. So I would greatly appreciate it if you could approve this variance and let me get on with repairing and replacing this roof with what I think would be attractive and functional, and certainly no less in performance than the current roofing designs that are out there right now. As I said, I've watched all my neighbors' roofs been replaced over these years. Mine has gone through every hailstorm, and even the blizzard of '83 and the cold Novembers that we've had, no problem whatsoever.
Thank you. Any
I have
questions?
a couple questions. Sure. You said you're a licensed engineer. What field?
Mechanical engineer.
Mechanical, okay. Have you contacted the manufacturer of the shingles?
Yes.
In reference to what you propose to do with your assembly?
Yes.
And what was their opinion?
Well, their comment was that 212 was based on experience. A lot of it comes from conventional roofs with attics that have condensation issues and what they call a hot roof, because I only have 2 inches of insulation on mine. So the shingle is, bottom line is they have no problem with the shingle deteriorating. That's all they can say. As far as the leakage, they just recommended sometimes when you go to low pitch roofs that they run a double layer of their own material, which is, kind of similar to Grace Ice and Water Shield, but it's slightly different. From what I have been able to read, from what I've been able to ascertain from the roofers, the Grace, I needed a glass of water. The Grace Ice and Water Shield is the superior product on the market.
Okay. One more question?
Sure.
Do you know of any other applications that have used the system you're proposing?
Not really. 175 to 2-inch pitch is kind of bizarre. The reason, as I said, they had why the guy designed it with a 175 pitch, I have no idea. They used to tether a goat up on the roof, and that kept the sod trimmed, and in the fall, they raised pumpkins. And people used to walk up on the roof and pick the pumpkins. So maybe that's the way his dimensional lumber worked out, I don't know. But it was kind of strange to me that, but at that time, they were probably, back in 1956, the code might not have existed. I know it did in '84 because, as I said, I was able to get a variance and a permit to apply the roof that I currently have.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
I do. Are you wanting to do grace on the whole roof or just at the edges?
Oh, no, the entire roof, top
Okay.
to bottom.
And that's, I can ask later, but I believe that's beyond what's required, is it not, for the city? I think you only require at the edge. And I just want to make sure I understand your roof composition again. So starting from the top, you'd have these shingles, which are they rated for any certain lifespan under a normal application, like 20 or 40 or 50 or?
According to the placard, they say 50 years.
50 years, okay. And
They're also Class 4 hail resistant.
Class 4, okay. And you would have, you'd have grace directly underneath that. Under that would be the plywood
The
underlayment.
sheathing that's currently there.
And then insulation, and then what's your structure again?
The structure at that point over the garage section of the house are rough sawn random width boards that are 5/4 thick. And that transitions to tongue and groove 2-by material that you see in the picture in the living area.
Oh, so that's your,
That is my ceiling. Above that is going to be, and I don't know, perhaps there's rough sawn above that because I've never been able to
Sure.
see.
Okay.
But I believe it just transitions from rough sawn to that in the living space.
Okay. I feel like I had another question for you. I'm sorry, I can't remember it.
Sure.
I'm not going to claim to be a roofing expert, but one thing I'm told about roof slope with regard to shingles is one concern is if you get too low of a pitch that the wind, basically you have more opportunity for wind uplift on the shingle, but on the side that's not nailed down. Did the roofing manufacturer comment on any of that at all? Or was-
No, these shingles do not blow off if you look at the specs on here, because you can go down to 212 on it. The wind and the shingle is not going to know the difference at 175. And first of all, there's parts of the roof on 212 if somebody has a 212 roof, there are going to be parts that are going to be less than 212 because plywood sags and sheathing sags in the middle. And as I said, you're only talking of 21 thousandths in an inch or a quarter in a foot.
Yeah, that was another comment, I guess, was I think another concern sometimes can be cupping with the underlayment over roof joists if it gets wet and whatnot, and so then the shingles might be able to retain some moisture underneath there.
I don't think so. I mean, the Grace Ice and Water Shield is an unpermeable membrane. And as I said, I'm using roofing felt right now, and there's never been, as I said, anybody is welcome to walk up on my roof and inspect it. There's no cup shingles, there's no moisture damage, there's no condensation issues.
Okay.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Does staff have any response to what's been said?
I have a question. What's the wind exposure category in the city of Littleton? Is it B?
Currently, it's exposure C.
It is exposure C?
Yeah.
Okay, and what's the wind speed?
110, I believe.
Okay.
I have a follow-up question for you also.
Excuse me, could you come to the podium, Gil? Thank you.
The follow-up question, if he uses the underlayment system that he's proposing.
Yeah, Grace Ice and Water
because
Shield.
it's between 2 and 4, is he required to double it?
Well, the code just
Current
talks about doubling what they would require. The code just talks about 15-pound felt, right? And so it would just be 2 layers of felt. The ice and water shield's far better than that could ever be.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else?
Okay, it's time now for us to discuss. Anybody have any comments before a motion is made?
I think, there's the code, there's some considerations for the homeowner are, since it's not, if we approve his request, he's still left with something that technically doesn't meet the code. So when you turn around to sell the home or whatnot, that's his issue. I'm wondering if the city attorney could comment on whether, the city could be held sort of liable or at fault for, approving something that was a variance from the code.
Members of the board, generally the city could not be held liable for this. You're going to be acting in your capacity of reviewing a decision of the chief building official, and so you're acting essentially like an administrative agency commission, and the fact that you make a judgment as long as you're in conformance with the code in terms of making that judgment, you're not considering either matters outside the code or you're not considering things that the code, for example, the code does not permit you to simply grant non-compliance with the code. You can do this kind of interpretation and say we're going to overrule the chief building official, but you couldn't, for example, suddenly say, well, section so-and-so of the code we don't like, we're not going to enforce it. If you did something like that, I would be concerned. Here you're acting in your capacity as a reviewing body, and you're well within your authority to do so. And you're not going to have liability for it. In essence, you're going to be rendering if you were to do that, a different interpretation in the chief building official, and that's exactly what the international code envisions you having the power to do.
Okay. In my opinion, the homeowner is at risk then, based on what you've said, because it's so the scenario I'm imagining is 10 or 20 years or whatever. Let's say the roof does break down, and the manufacturer, somebody claims it was because of this, the slope wasn't quite enough. The city would not be at fault or liable for that decision. Then is what I'm hearing you say.
That's correct. The concern is not the city's liability. Obviously, the homeowner, should they sell the house and there was a mortgage or whatever, they may have those types of issues, but those are not city issues. Those have nothing to do with us. They have nothing to do with the building code. Those are just issues that are between the homeowner and some prospective buyer in the future.
And that is actually, I'm sorry, another question I would have for the homeowner is your roof still insurable?
Responses need to be into the microphone for the purposes of the record, just for future clarification.
Yes, if you have questions like to either the homeowner or the
Okay.
city, if you could have them come up, we just want to make sure we have it. in
Would you
the
come up to the
application.
podium, please, and answer that question? Thank you.
My home is fully insured. There's no requirement in the insurance that specifies a roof pitch. It has been insured by State Farm for 44 years, when it was a Silver Cool roof and under my current roof. And again, I have never had a roofing claim.
You have not had a roofing claim?
Never.
Is your insurance provider aware that the pitch is slightly under 212?
Never came up in conversation.
Okay.
But it doesn't really matter because it was less than 212 when it was insured before it had shingles.
There's a possibility an insurance provider might come out and, if there is a claim, they could, actually measure the pitch and try and get out of covering you. It sounds far-fetched, but I mean, is that something you've looked into or examined your insurance
No,
documents?
because, as I said, I'm basing it on history and performance. And the only thing they would have to certify is that the damage was caused because of the pitch. If I have a hailstone come down and rip a hole through my roof, they can't fault the pitch. As a matter of fact, think of it as if the roof was flat and I had just which, by the way, the rest of my house has a flat roof. And I have torch down material on it. And torch down material is actually less expensive than what I currently have, and it's only good for 20 years if you get that out of it. I'm about to re-roof that section right now. So far, I've gotten 25 out of it. But it's an inferior product compared to these legacy XL shingles.
Okay, and just so you sort of stating on the record, I mean, you understand, or do you assume all, basically liability? I don't know if that's the right word, but you assume all of the risk that we're talking about here with regard to, maybe there's an outside chance your insurance company squabbles about the roof pitch, warranty issues with your roof, things like that, that you're at risk by being somewhat unconventional with what, they would like to see.
Absolutely.
I do have one question.
Thank you.
You mentioned that the rest of the roof is flat. What materials are you going to be using on that? Is that comparable to this?
No. On the flat roof, actually, it was a flat roof, and I designed in a slight slope to it. I had 2x10s ripped down to give me a little bit of a pitch, because even on flat roofs, even though materials such as rolled roofing or that's adhered with a mastic, or torch down roofing, which is heated and applied, you can get puddling on that, and a puddle on those roofs still deteriorate the roof. That's why they don't last as long. And so consequently, I put in a pitch to that, and so far I've gotten 25 years out of a roof that typically goes 15 to 20.
Okay. Any other questions?
But that roof is not visible from Prince Street. And if you look at it, it is not very attractive. There's a silicone roof, a membrane roof that I was considering, but that even looks more like a Butler building or a commercial building when you apply it.
The gentleman that spoke previous to you, are they your neighbors at all by chance, or do they live in your neighborhood?
I don't know who those gentlemen are. This is the first time I've met them.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Then I have a comment. I also contacted, as it turns out, I didn't know that he had. I contacted technical support for Malarkey Roofing Products, and I described the pitch as 1.75 to 12, and asked for their opinion with a underlayment of ice and water rather than felt. And I talked to a level 2 technical person and asked the same question. And he said, well, our specs say 2. And I said, if it was your roof and it was 1.75, would you feel comfortable putting your product over it and having it not leak? And he said, I would have no problem if there was 2 layers of ice and water underneath it, and probably not 1 layer. But he said, I would certainly be comfortable because of the sealing properties. The real issue, he said, is around the nails and the ice and water, and to some degree the asphalt. The ice and water seals. And so his comment was, no problem if there was 2 layers of ice and water underneath. And probably, he's hedging because he's, he doesn't want to, I guess, I'm not sure what his motives are, but maybe he doesn't want to undo what they're specking, but those are his comments. So I think we're ready for a motion then, unless there's some other comment.
I'd just like to briefly talk about what we as a board have the ability to do. Because looking at the administrative process here, Title IV, the Littleton Municipal Code, on alternative material and designs, it seems like the board really only has power to make a decision when there are alternative methods or designs that are not specifically already laid out in the building code. And I don't know if the city attorney could give us his opinion on that.
Members of the board, I'm going to walk up here so I can look at all of you. Yes, when you look at both Section 4, Chapter 4 of the code, and you look at the International Code, which the city has adopted, the 2012 International Code, Section 113, they really fit together, and that is this board cannot waive any provisions of the building code. What you can do is you can determine, and the International Code, I think, puts it very good and very simply, that either the intent of the code has been incorrectly interpreted, or the provisions of this code do not fully apply, or an equally good or better form of construction is proposed. So you can do one of those 3. What you can't do is suddenly say, well, we're going to waive the provisions of the code. So I think really what's before you tonight is you can adopt the interpretation of the chief building official, or you could overrule that interpretation based on a finding that an equally good or better form of construction is proposed that satisfies the intent of the International Code as adopted by the city. So you're really dealing with those 2 options. And you are a reviewing entity, and so and I'm going to digress here for a second so that you understand the standard of proof. As a reviewing entity of an administrative decision, if all things are equal, you would defer, the principle of law here is that you defer to the decision of the agency. You're looking at this from a standard of if you determine that, well, no, in looking at the code, I don't think all things are equal. I think that there's an equally good or better form of construction, and that should have been permitted, then it would be within this board's ability to make that decision and grant that interpretation of the code. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. All right. If there's no more discussion, well, I'm ready for a motion.
Based off of the city attorney's position, I would like to make a motion to uphold the CBO's decision. I don't think that the question here is really, did the prior roof last? Because it obviously did. It looks great, but that's really not what we're asked to be deciding here. It's, were we presented with an option that is equally good or better than a 2-inch over a foot-long distance? And I don't think that I've been, received any evidence to say, what we've heard tonight is better than what the code requires.
Mr. Chair, what I would ask is that we first we make the motion and then the board entertain discussion. I'm just a little bit concerned here that we try to maintain a nice, complete record. I know I'm being a little bit lawyerly, but from our standpoint, the proper process here is let's make the motion. A motion's been made, and I would then now ask the chair to open up the motion for discussion.
Excuse me. Okay, I'm going to ask, is there a second to the motion?
The motion was never completed.
Again, I would like to make a motion to uphold the chief building officer's decision.
Is there a second?
I will second that.
Okay. Okay. Jeff, you want to, anything to add?
No, really nothing to add, just, reiterating what the city attorney has stated is our authority in this case.
Okay, thank you.
Procedurally, are we still allowed to ask questions of the homeowner and the building official?
No, you've now got a motion on the floor, so you need to resolve this motion. You've taken your testimony, you're now at a decision-making point, so you are able to ask further questions because you now have a motion on the floor.
Okay. I'm going to vote no on this motion. I believe that a combination of history, my conversation with the manufacturer, some knowledge of the underlayment.
I guess this is a case of, I have no issue with the chief building official. I think he applied the code. My only concern at this point is the homeowner, his intent with his structure, with his design, will it hold up? So that's what I have to weigh.
Any other comments?
I have to wonder if the homeowner were to submit revised another permit or something that in which he was able to obtain a letter from the roof material manufacturer stating that, with 2 layers of ice and water shield, that this shingle could be used for this application, whether the building official would approve it, and that's why I know we're procedurally not there, but that's why I asked the question of you guys procedurally. I think, I'll keep my comment there.
Okay. I think then we're ready to vote. Okay, would you?
So the motion was to uphold the chief building official's decision. I'm going to go down the roll and just say aye or yay or nay. Board Member Mansky.
I'm going to say nay.
Okay. Board Member Houchin.
Nay.
Chair Mitchell.
Nay.
Board Member Kaiser.
Yay.
Board Member Eby.
Yay.
That was 3 against and 2 for it, so that motion fails.
Okay.
Does this decide the matter? Do we need a new motion?
Need another motion?
Okay.
Since there is a new motion, are we permitted to ask further questions?
At this point, this motion has failed, so there's no motions on the table, so the chair would be able to have a person come up and give additional testimony, but once you make the motion, you can't do that.
Who would you like to see?
The homeowner.
Could you come to the podium, please? Thanks.
The question has been brought about putting down the underlay. what is your position? Are you going to put one layer or two?
According to the roofer that I've been speaking with, they feel that one layer is fine. The purpose of the underlayment is to prevent really ice damming. There are no ice damming problems on the roof. Okay, the self-sealing factor that has been proven to work with roofing felt that does not seal, and you have a shingle that is fully adhered to the underlayment, there really is no reason for two. As I said, probably in the cost of the roof, the underlayment is the most expensive part. Grace Ice and Water Shield is very expensive. I'm not sure how well it goes down as two layers. Sometimes my plan is to lay a double layer down at the edge of the roof where, you know, you would see ice damming, but to get ice damming in the middle of my roof, which is a full sun roof during the day, and as I said, with all the storms that we've had, I don't have any ice dams because that would have shown up in lifted shingles and other catastrophic failures of parts of the roof. That has not been the case. So I don't see any need for it. If I'm forced to do that, I guess I would do that. It's an additional significant expense that I'm not sure gains me anything.
When you talk about the edge, how far in are they talking?
Generally,
From
you
the
go up
edge of the
several
roof
feet.
to how many inches, feet into the center of the roof?
You generally don't do the edges of the sides of the roof. You do the bottom edge where you typically would have the damming occur. But
Right.
there's going to be ice and water shield under the shingles overhanging the edge.
And the code says 2 feet above the inside wall. Any other questions of the homeowner? Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Is there another motion to be made? I would like to turn the chair over to my vice chair, and I would like to make a motion.
Okay, anybody have a motion to deny the chief buildings officials? Or affirm.
Okay, I have a motion.
Okay,
I move to affirm the chief building, I move to overturn the chief building official's decision and to allow the installation of asphalt shingles as an alternative roofing method at 6383 South Prince Street with the understanding, and as part of that motion, the owner/roofer must use 2 layers of W.R. Grace Ice and Water Shield and the Malarkey Legacy XL shingles as described in the homeowner's proposal and all other materials as called for in the code. That's my motion.
And Member Mitchell, and I take it that is based on the fact that you're, as part of the motion, finding that this is an equally good form of construction that meets the requirements for an interpretation under the code.
Thank you. Would you add that to the motion, please? Thank you.
I have a motion, do I have a second?
I'll second.
I have a motion and a second. Discussion? Okay, not being any discussion, I will call for a vote.
All right, this vote to overturn the chief building official's decision and to allow the installation with the condition that Chair Mitchell had mentioned. Board Member Mansky.
Aye.
Board Member Houchin.
Nay.
Chair Mitchell.
Aye.
Board Member Kaiser.
Nay.
Board Member Eby.
Nay.
I believe the vote was 3 nays and 2 ayes.
Thank you.
So the chair would then have to now, the acting chair needs to either entertain another motion
or hand the chair back?
I believe, Member Mitchell, once you've relinquished the chair, you've relinquished it for all of the, actually, because this is a new motion, yes, he could hand the chair back, because it's a new motion, so yes, he could do it.
I, at this point, relinquish the chair back to Mr. Mitchell.
Thank you. So we are still looking for a motion.
Can I ask a question to the building official, please?
Gil, could you? Thank you.
Certainly. So, in your opinion, based on what Mr. Mitchell has moved, would 2 layers of grace be a improvement, an equal or better to the code?
Would it be an acceptable alternative? And
An
that is
acceptable
what-
alternative, yeah.
That is what your job is.
All right.
Thank you. I'm going to ask for a 5-minute adjournment. Everybody can recess. Thank you. Thank you. 5-minute recess. We all gather our thoughts and come back and see where we are. Okay? 7:36. So we'll be back here at 7:41. Okay. It's 7:42. We're back in session. So we're still looking for a motion.
Actually, before we have a motion, I have a question for the city attorney. So we had two choices. We could overturn the building official's review, correct?
Yes.
Or we can find that the material or the proposed roof assembly meets the intent of the code.
Yes, you could find, in essence, you have, one choice would be to affirm the building official. The second choice would be to find that the proposed construction by the applicant is equally good or better and meets the intent of the code.
Okay, thank you.
Or you could determine, as the prior motion did, that the request of the applicant with the addition of, for example, the 2 layers of underlayment would meet the equally or better form of construction under the code.
What Steve said, no.
Okay, do I have a motion?
Can I make a comment?
Sure.
First? Okay, so first of all, a question in the back of this packet, something from Sterling Codifiers. Is this city code? Is this city code that I'm seeing right here? Okay. So what I'm reading, the Board of Appeals may approve an alternate material design or method provided they find that the proposed design is satisfactory and complies with the provisions of the building codes and that the material, method, or work offered is for the purpose intended, at least the equivalent of that prescribed in the building codes for suitability, strength, effectiveness, fire resistance, durability, safety, and sanitation. I just think that's those categories that I read off seem applicable in this case. I think a stronger case might have been made if the homeowner had brought to the building official some letter or some statement to the building official saying, this is a little non-conventional, but in the manufacturer's opinion or whoever, this alternate means would be acceptable. We don't really have that, though. You've contacted them, so
Okay.
that's my comment.
Do I have a motion?
I move that we find that the system proposed with the proviso that there's 2 underlayment be attached to the roof before the shingles.
What I'd suggest is perhaps you could sort of slightly reword the motion. Instead of it being that the system proposed, that you would move that you would find that the decision of the chief building official should be overruled and that the system of blank blank is an equally or better form of construction meeting the intent of the code.
Okay? What Steve just said.
Put it in that format, that would be fine.
With the understanding that there's 2 underlayment on the roof of the W.R. Grace Ice and Water Shield.
And that would, and you find that that is an equally or better form of construction meeting the intent of the code.
Correct. And it does meet the intent of the code for protection from ice and water.
Mr. Chair, you have a motion on the floor.
I have a motion on the floor. Is there a second?
Would you like us to read back that motion?
Yeah, sorry.
You want me to see if I can?
Yeah.
Yeah. I believe that there was a motion to overrule the decision of the chief building official and that the construction of the roof with 2 layers of the designated underlayment, the WR underlayment, and would constitute an equally or better form of construction proposed and meeting the intent of the code and providing adequate protection from water and ice.
That's what he said.
Just like that. And I didn't go to school for that one.
Okay, thank you.
I'll second.
Okay, so we have a second. First, Motion and a second. Is there any additional discussion? Would you call for a vote? Would you ask,
Yes, I will.
would you poll the board?
Board Member Mansky.
Aye.
Board Member Houchin.
Aye.
Chair Mitchell.
Aye.
Board Member Kaiser.
Aye.
Board Member Eby.
Aye.
All right, that vote is unanimous and the motion carries.
Thank you. The last thing we have this evening is,
Mr. Chair, just for the record, based on that.
excuse me. I'm going to ask the city attorney, under supervision, to a statement of findings, statement of fact, findings of fact, thank you.
Yeah.
Findings of fact, and prepare it for my signature.
Based on the adopted motion, I will prepare and submit to the board a set of findings and facts and conclusions of law based on the adopted motion for the chair, and that becomes the official record should there be, together with all the other documents, should there be an appeal of this to any court.
Thank you. Okay. Okay, and we do have any comments by staff? Not about this issue, of course, but just in general comments by staff? No?
No comments, thank you.
Do any members of the board have any comments? I adjourn the meeting.